if the world were to end tomorrow, the happiest segment of the week. If the world were to end tomorrow, what would happen with all the Hall of Famers? And we say that, look, it's amazing how many people take it literally when I pose that question. Obviously, there would be no Hall of Fame. There would be no Hall of Fame ceremony. If the world were to end tomorrow, we'd all be dead. These issues would instantly become moot. So to placate those who want to, point out that it's impossible to have a Hall of Fame ceremony if the world were to end tomorrow, if football were to go away tomorrow, who gets in that's currently playing? We talked about several of the positions last week, Charean. This week, let's start with the running backs, right? Adrian Peterson is the one who somehow is still playing, is now positioned to be the starter and the bell cow for the Washington football team because of the release of Darius Geis. Beyond Adrian Peterson, the first ballot lock, who else do you see playing running back right now who has a chance of getting in if the sport were to end tomorrow?
Well, last week we did 10 years or less, and I'm going to talk about a guy who's played way longer than 10 years, and that's Frank Gore. And I think he's done a lot of great things. I think, he's going to end up in obviously the top 3 in rushing all time. So I think you've got to consider Frank Gore for the Hall of Fame. And I don't know that he's going to be first ballot. He made all decade finally. And, he's made no all pro teams, but just his sheer numbers and the length of his career, I think you've got to put Frank Gore in the Hall of Fame eventually. But that's where I would start, probably with Adrian Peterson, who to me is a lock, and Frank Gore would be the two guys I think have the best chance, obviously, of going into the Hall of Fame.
When Frank Gore's name comes up and people say, oh, all he's done is played a long time, I say, do you not realize how hard it is to play a long time at that position? To continue to line up every year. I feel like between Gore and Peterson, they will continue to play as long as someone gives them a job and gives them a helmet and puts them on the field. They both can pass Emmitt Smith. The question is, will there be enough teams that let them have the opportunity to compile the yards necessary to pass Emmitt Smith? So I just think that, it's one thing for a kicker to play as long as Frank Gore has. It's another thing, sorry, kickers, but it's the truth. It's another thing for Frank Gore to be out there getting banged around on every single time that he touches the football. It's amazing what he's done, and I think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Especially because who else is in that bucket? We've got quarterbacks, we've got receivers, we've got pass rushers, we've got everything, but there aren't many running backs that stand out. Beyond Peterson and Gore, Marshawn Lynch, I don't know. He's another guy who's been around more than 10 years, but still, for running backs, we can't apply that limitation. Is he a guy who's done enough to get in if he never plays again?
I think it's really close. We talked a little bit last week about the all-decade team. It used to be if you made the first team all-decade team, you were in the Hall of Fame, aside from Drew Pearson. But you were in automatically the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It happened at some point. But now they changed the process this year. So instead of having a first team and a second team, it's all lumped together. And so the all-decade running backs were Marshawn Lynch, LaShawn McCoy, Adrian Peterson, and Frank Gore in this last one. And so I think you have to consider him because he made all-decade, but I don't think all-decade is as relevant as it once was with all of them being lumped in together. To me, there weren't 4 all-decade running backs. You needed to have 2 on the first team and 2 on the second team. But that's the way it was done. But I do think he has a shot. I'd like to see him play again, another year or 2, because I think he has that in him. Maybe somebody gives him a chance late in the season like Seattle did last season. But I think he's really close to being a Hall of Fame running back.
I think he's now firmly in that Roger Clemens mode that I personally thought Brett Favre would do for a year or 2 at the end of his career, or tacked onto it, where you just show up for late December and January and you try to get one more Super Bowl win. And that would cement it, I think. If he could just pull that off, I think it would make it a no-brainer. For now, it's a close call. Other guys, look, Ezekiel Elliott's on track, right? But he would
no
he
question.
He hasn't done enough. He hasn't done enough to get in if football goes away tomorrow, right?
No question. 115th in yards, a little over 5,000 yards. He's been great in the 4 years he's played, but yeah, he needs to do way more than what he's done so far. One guy I didn't realize had as many yards as he did was Mark Ingram. He's 64th with over 7,000 yards. But I wouldn't put Mark Ingram in that category either. I think he's got to do much more in his career to get into the Hall of Fame. And so if it ended today, I'm not putting Mark Ingram or Ezekiel Elliott in the Hall of Fame. And LaShawn McCoy is kind of one who I think is right there on the edge as well. What do you think of LaShawn McCoy?
Yeah, look, I right now probably would say no, but what would help him is the fact that there just aren't many running backs, and there won't be many running backs because of the way the game has changed. So, when we get 10, 15, 20, 25 years out, if the world doesn't end and if I'm still around to watch it, at some point LaShawn McCoy's name is going to sneak through the cracks because the argument's going to be, we haven't put a running back in a while. Now, between Christian McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott, that's going to change. But even beyond, really, how many running backs right now are even on track to have a chance at the Hall of Fame? You've got McCaffrey, you've got Elliott. It's too premature for a guy like a Dalvin Cook. He's had one healthy year. It's way too premature for him.
Le'Veon Bell.
There just aren't a lot of guys. He's going to have a career rebirth starting now. Now, not next year, not with his next team. He's got to rediscover his Pittsburgh form now to get back in that position. So at some point, based on, and look, I know that what happens in the room is discreet and private and secret, but I've heard enough from people, not you, I don't want to get you in trouble. I've heard from other voters enough to come to the conclusion that at some point somebody's going to stand up and say, we haven't had a running back in 5 years. It's time to put a running back in, and that's going to help LaShawn McCoy get in.
Yeah, and it very well could. You're exactly right. And I do think that does happen. It happened with the safety position. Lord, we didn't put safeties in forever. And now it seems like we're putting a safety in every year to try to make up for that backlog. And I think you're going to see that with tight ends and eventually, as you said, with running backs, because there just aren't a lot of running backs in this class playing right now. It's become such a passing league and the running backs have such short careers where we're putting them in year after year after year. And I do think we're going to hit that lull after the Adrian Petersons and Frank Gores, where we are going to look back and we're going to say, boy, it's been 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever it's been since we've put a running back in. Adrian Peterson was the last. We've got to put a running back in the Hall of Fame. And that does happen, and I think it will happen in this case. And we maybe see a guy who goes in who is right there on the edge like a LaShawn McCoy.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.